Knock knock.
Who's there?
Anne.
And who?
An investigation into the effects of physical and vocal rhythm upon the performer's portrayal of meaning within their use of text, referring to Stuart Lee's deconstruction of linguistic form in joke telling. The actor versus text contraposition is home to a great deal of opposing academic opinion. Peter Hall, for example, alleges that language, and I quote, tells the actor when to go fast and go slow, when to come in on cue, and when to accent a particular series of words. End quote, Hall, 2009. This suggests an absolute textual dominance, which is opposed, for example, by the later Stanislavskian and Grotowskian approaches to acting, whereby physical action and physical score are at the heart of the actor's craft, which incidentally we will define as their portrayal. In examining the work of the alternative comedian and spoken word poet Stuart Lee, amongst other theatrical and linguistic theory, one can begin to draw conclusions regarding the relevance of rhythm to the balance of this relationship, and in turn, the implications this may have upon any perceived notion of meaning. In order to interrogate the rhythmic relationship between performer and text, one must initially highlight that the word rhythm, in this case, does not refer to the regular, audible beats that it does as a popular Western musical term. The rhythm to which my question refers is a broader concept, tending more towards John Cage's structural and durational rhythms, within which, and I quote, form ceases to be an issue at all. Since all sounds are interrelated, there can be no matter of making a continuity. End quote, Cage, 1971. This understanding of rhythm, when considered beyond John Cage's specifically musical context, is the existence of any structural pattern within a duration. How many of what things or events occur in what order? This unrestricted concept of rhythm shares similarities with Stuart Lee's outlook on stand-up comedy. And I quote, I realised that stand-up was just one man on stage in a room, and so stand-up was infinite. Taking this into account, it's fair to argue that rhythm is also an infinite universal concept, which fundamentally depends upon the fluctuations of energy within a duration or a space. Written text, then, could be seen to inhabit a rhythmic presence. A text is a series of events, symbols or letters that exist in a specific order within a structure. In understanding that this order of letters and words defines our literal interpretation of language, it's natural to assume that the rhythmic structure of a text informs the experience that it communicates, or its meaning. For example, one sees the letters T, R, E, E in order and, via their own previous association, understands this rhythmical structure as a lyric for the entity referred to as a tree. Although less so than common prose, jokes provide a more complex rhythmic structure than an individual word. Take, for example, the text on the back of your programme. Knock knock, who's there? Doris. Doris who? Doris locked, that's why I'm knocking. The words which construct its narrative can be seen to rhythmically encourage laughter. And I quote, the notion that laughter is a response to a conceptual shift, a change in our perception of the state of the world around us, is closely mirrored by the classic joke structure. First, the setup. We're presented with a universe of facts and characters, and then, with the punchline, comes a paradigm shift. That one line forces you to reinterpret all the facts that went before, presenting an entirely different picture of events with a different internal logic. End quote, Carr, 2007. This observation would suggest a determined humour inherent in the rhythm of the joke, a notion that's unrealistic. It's highly unlikely, if not impossible, that two portrayals of a text would be exactly the same.
Knock knock, who's there? Doris. Doris who? Doris locked, that's why I'm knocking. Knock knock, who's there? Doris. Doris who? Doris. Doris who? Doris locked, that's why I'm knocking. Knock knock. Doris who? Door is locked. That's why I'm looking.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Doris.
Doris who?
Doris locked. That's why I'm knocking. Knock, knock. Who's there? Doris. Doris who? Doris locked. That's why I'm knocking. Knock, knock. Who's there? Doris. Doris who? Doris locked. That's why I'm knocking. Knock. 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 Oh. 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 Knock. Oh. 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 Who? Who's there? Doris. De opera is de opera is de oh. De opera is who. Doris locked, locked. That's why I'm knocking, knock, who's there? Who's there? Doris, knock, who's there? Doris who? Doris locked. That's why I'm knocking. That's why I'm knocking. Knock. No. Who's there? Who?
Knock.
Who's there?
Joe.
Joe
Jokes, as any other text for that matter, appear not to hold this inherent rhythm and effect that seemed inevitable. It's only in considering the somatic oratory origins of jokes and of language itself that one can begin to understand the effects of a performer's rhythm upon their text. And I quote, "I can on another day be convinced that it, language, began as open-throated, appetite-related grunts and groans, dealing with life and death issues indivisible from the experience. The quantum leap or crawl in the evolution of speech, if speech begun thus, was articulation, and the agents that articulated, interrupted and shaped the flow of roaring sound were parts of the mouth which had hitherto been used for appetite-related functions." End quote, Linklater, 2009. As this hypothetical articulation evolves, the specificity of the sounds and their categorization develops, and develops and a somatic vocal language is created. Under, and I quote, the growing influence of print, end quote, Linklater 2009, language has become a misinterpreted tool, severed from the body and stored instead in the associative consciousness. It seems that in order to, and I quote, connect with the full human range of intellect and emotion, body and voice, end quote, Linklater 2009, the words on a page should not be treated as descriptive images, but as the rhythmically structured, via order and punctuation, phonetic documentation of somatic sounds for a reader, and more importantly a speaker, to experience. And I quote, jokes rightly belong to an oral culture. They live out loud, not on a page. A joke on paper is a pale and inadequate one-dimensional reproduction of itself. It scarcely exists until someone has told it, and someone else has laughed, or not. End quote, Carr, 2007. Returning to the notion of a universal rhythm, we can assume that the human body functions rhythmically. The heart, for example, contracts and relaxes in rhythm, depending upon the fluctuating energetic requirements of the body. The end of this pattern is the end of life, or the end of a duration. In fact, all sensory activity occurs rhythmically. Therefore, a performer's portrayal of a text must on some level be under the influence of physical rhythm. The receipt of shapes on a page by the photoreceptors as the eye scans them chronologically is a rhythmic, physically stimulating process, as is the shortness of breath and raising heart rate as a performer jogs, and the vibration of sound waves created by the vocalising performer. The portrayal of text is ultimately at the mercy of the performer's physical state. Stuart Lee, whilst monotonously discussing, and I quote, political correctness gone mad, end quote, Lee 2009, begins to spontaneously beat the microphone into his forehead. Alongside what is in fact a relatively dull, absurd and insignificant rant about one-legged ballerinas, the rhythmic structure of this repetitive action still manages to stimulate, generally, and speaking only for this piece of footage, a laugh amongst the audience. In mentioning audience, it's convenient to discuss the relationship between portrayal and what I have termed meaning. We begin with the simplified explanation that, and I quote, context is everything, end quote, Carr 2007. This is true. The receipt of a portrayal as a rhythmic event in itself by an audience depends entirely upon the context into which it falls. It's fair to examine the context as a rhythmic structure or duration. The series within which an event, physical or narrative, falls is its context. In the consequential rhythmic relation to other events, associations will arise. It is unreliable and invalid to attempt to inform a meaning. As a performer, one can only assume a portrayal. I return to the earlier Stuart Lee quote in which it is suggested that the mere presence of a person defines stand-up comedy and thus its limitlessness. As opposed to trying to create funny, Lee suggests that his presence, or portrayal alone, in relation to the rhythmic, phenomenological context of each audience member, will stimulate infinite perceptions of meaning. This notion brings to mind Peter Brook's classic quote, I can take any empty space and call it a bare stage. A man walks across this empty space while someone else is watching him, and this is all that's needed for an act of theatre to be engaged. End quote, Brooke. Both Lee and Brooke tend towards the meticulous use of text in their art forms. If meaningless once in the body of a performer, and surplus to stand-up comedy and theatre, why then maintain this tendency towards text? David Ian Raby suggests that language is, and I quote, a form of energy which links the electricity of your truth to the world around you. Metre and rhythm help to earth that energy and find a safe way of embodying it in words. End quote, Raby, 2008. This quote quite interestingly brings together a few previous notions. The rhythm of language, which is a primal somatic experience, provides the physical and psychological context necessary for a performer to partake in the communicative, discursive act that is theatre.
Knock, knock, who's there? Doris. Doris who? Doris locked. That's why I'm knocking. It's a good joke. I mean, obviously it's a knock-knock joke. But this particular knock-knock joke relies completely on its structure. If it weren't a knock-knock joke, it'd just be someone mishearing someone else, and that's not funny. I read some notes. These are my lines. Just normal. I say knock knock, who's there? Doris. Doris who? Doris locked us. That's why I'm knocking. Talked a bit about structure. So, notes. We'll come to this and this later. I started a little essay on it, just to see if some sort of further writing could help me. A better way of explaining it, I just want to explain it. Didn't quite work, so I did a bit of maths. I thought maybe the formula could sort of, I don't know, help me understand it with some trigger words. Did a semi-absurdist sketch. I think the best way is to show you. I'm just going to show you what it'd be like. I think that's the best way to explain it. So it'd go like this. It'd be a door. Who's there? We've got a door. Yeah. We've got a door. Yeah. We've got. Right, it's a delete then. I thought the door was the problem. I thought the problem was that because it's on the map here, innit? Knock knock. No one actually says it. We've got a door, it's fine. Right. So this is actually how it would be because of the door involved. No door, no joke. Well, it'd be two knocks. Who's there? Doris? Doris who? Because she knows more than one. Doris locked, that's why I'm knocking. I mean, this door is open, but... This is not the actual door in question. This is just try not to explain. Got the door, but at this point I'm Doris. Look, I've made a t-shirt. I've just... Right? I'm Doris. For the joke, just try to get it as real as possible. Who's there? Doris? Doris who? Doris locked, that's why I'm knocking. Not saying Doris though, am I? Saying Doris. That's this is bullshit. Sunday, you got a pen?
Yeah, it's fine, mate.
Name's Aidan. A lot you know who I am. Right, on. There you go, Sunday. Thanks. Saying Doris. Last time, I think I think I've explained everything. Who's there? No, it's still not working. I'm going to use it. I'm going to use the actual door because I think it's the door. I'm going to go outside. I'm going to knock on the door. Say who's there. Sorry, not it works.
Who's there?
Can't fucking hear him. It's alright. Knock, knock, who's there? Doris, Doris, who? Door is locked, that's why I'm knocking. Knock, knock, who's there? Doris, Doris, who? Doris locked, that's why I'm knocking. Knock, knock, who's there? Doris, Doris, who? Doris locked, that's why I'm knocking. Knock, knock, who's there? Doris, Doris, who? Doris locked, that's why I'm knocking. Knock, knock, who's there? Doris, Doris who? Doris locked, locked, that's why I'm knocking. Knock, 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 who's there? Doris, Doris who? Doris who? Doris locked, 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 that's why I'm knocking. Knock, knock, who's there? Doris, Doris who? Doris, Doris locked, that's why I'm knocking. Knock, knock, who's there? Doris, Doris who? Doris locked, that's why I'm knocking. Knock, knock, who's there? Doris, 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 Doris who? Doris locked, Doris locked, that's why I'm knocking. Knock, knock, who's there? Doris, Doris who? Doris locked, that's why I'm knocking.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Doris.
Doris, Doris who?
Doris locked, that's why I'm knocking. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Doris.
Doris, Doris who?
Doris locked, that's why I'm knocking. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Doris.
Doris
Doris locked, that's why I'm knocking. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Doris.
Doris, Doris, Doris who? Doris who?
Locked, that's why I'm knocking. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Doris.
Doris who?
Doris locked, that's why I'm knocking.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Doris.
Doris who?
Doris locked. That's why I'm knocking. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Doris.
Doris who?
Doris locked. That's why I'm knocking. Knock, knock. Who's there? Doris.
Doris who?
Doris locked. Locked. It's locked. The door is locked. That's why I'm knocking on it. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Doris.
Doris who?
Doris locked. That's why I'm knocking on it. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Doris.
Doris who?
Doris locked. That's why I'm knocking on it.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Doris.
Doris who?
Door is locked, that's why I'm knocking. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Doris.
Doris who?
Doris locked, that's why I'm knocking. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Doris.
Doris who?
Doris locked, that's why I'm knocking. Knock, knock!
Who's there?
Doris!
Doris who?
Doris locked! That's why I'm knocking! Knock, knock!
Who's there?
Doris!
Doris who?
The door is locked! That's why I'm knocking!
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Doris.
Doris who?
Door is locked! That's why I'm knocking on it! Knock, knock!
Who's there?
Doris!
Doris who?
Door is locked! That's why I'm knocking on it! Knock, knock!
Who's there?
Cheers.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Ian.
Ian.
In conclusion, one must initially establish the obvious facts. That texts, that is, series of shapes with which humans associate meaning, and performers, people on stage in front of others, do exist individually. A joke can by all means be funny in itself, and a performer can exist without having a joke to tell. It is, however, in understanding a symbiosis between these concepts, the notion that a text cannot exist theatrically without a performer, whilst a performer cannot exist in context without a text, that we're able to define the effect of a performer's physical and vocal rhythm upon their portrayal of a text. The portrayal and in turn meaning of a text lie in the mileage yielded from it by a performer. And I quote, "I write words that I want to say. That seems obvious to me. They're all right when they're written down and they make sense, but they're only there so that people can speak them." End quote, John Cooper Clarke, 2012. Cheers.